to discuss this hot topic of employee handbooks. I was really overwhelmed by the number of people who registered for the session. We have over 100 people on the call representing 16 states and a variety of industries. We've got folks on here from education, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services. So we've got a whole bunch of different individuals, and I'm excited to be talking with you about this topic. I'm Lori Dahlberg, and I am the HR Consulting Manager for Eide, and I work with a variety of clients on HR-related matters, several of which happen to fall under the Employee Handbook realm. So I've actually worked with several clients to either create handbooks when they didn't have one in place, or to help them review their handbook to make sure that they were up to date. So it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I happen to enjoy employee handbooks, but I do realize that most of you are on this call because you have to be. It's a compliance-related matter. But hopefully you're going to gather some information today that you'll be able to take back to your organization and really make your business better from a risk mitigation perspective as it relates to employment handbooks. So we are going to start off with a statistic. All right, so a statistic. Employers face about a 12% chance of employee litigation. And for businesses that have fewer than 500 employees, that number actually climbs to around 20%. Employees tend to be a little bit sue-happy when it comes to things that surround being paid. So some of the primary reasons that an employee may file a claim against an employer could be because of wage and hour violations, meaning that they're not being paid for the work that they're doing, or they're not being paid overtime appropriately. Harassment, hostile work environment, or bullying that takes place in the workplace. Discrimination, whether that is through the application process, promotion process, transfers, pay increases, training opportunities, and benefits. Wrongful termination, so an employee is terminated and they don't think they should have been. On-the-job injuries due to employer negligence, so an employer not having safety procedures in place that employees are aware of. An employee gets injured and then they file a claim. And then immigration issues, or issues surrounding employing individuals who are not authorized to work in the United States. So not having an employee handbook in place that outlines a lot of those things can cause employees to feel like their only recourse would be to file a claim against their employer. So a key way of preventing that from happening is to have a solid employee handbook, one that outlines the expectations that you have of employees in your organization, as well as demonstrating your compliance with federal and state mandated laws. Okay, so what is an employee handbook? It's important to understand what an employee handbook is so that you can either ensure that yours includes the proper information, or if you're just starting out and you need to create one, you know what to include. First thing to keep in mind with an employee handbook is that you need to write the handbook with the employee as the intended audience. This is a document intended for employees. So you want to make sure that you write it in straightforward language, that you organize it in an easy layout for employees to find important information related to your policies, procedures, and expectations. It's going to be used as a tool for allowing your employees to become familiar with your basic company policies and benefit programs. And then you want to make sure that it outlines your general expectations, which include acceptable and unacceptable behavior. When should you have an employee handbook? Well, if you have more than a few employees, you need a handbook. And there are federal employment laws that apply when you have just one employee. There are actually 10 different federal regulations that apply once you have a single employee. And then as you grow and you add employees onto your workforce, there are additional laws that apply, and it's when you hit these various thresholds. So when you hit 11 employees, more laws and regulations come into play. Then when you hit 15 employees, there's even more. At 20, there's more. At 50, there's even more. And at 100, you have to comply with every single federal, state, and county regulation that is out there as it relates to employment law. So it's really, really important to make sure that if you have employees, that you have an employee handbook. The other thing I want to mention here is that if you are a federal contractor, there are also 9 more compliance requirements that you would need to address, and you'll want to make sure those go into an employee handbook as well. So what does an employee handbook do? Right? We realize we have to have one. Everybody tells us we have to have one, but what exactly does it do? One of the primary things that an employee handbook does is it allows you to communicate important information to your employees in a consistent format. When you have an employee handbook, it should be given to every single employee. If you make an update, the employee handbook has to be given to every single employee again. If you have new hires come on board, you want to make sure that you're providing them with the handbook and going through the different policies and sections of the handbook. And in doing that, you are consistently sharing information so that employees know what they can expect from you and what you expect from them. Why should you have an employee handbook? Well, for starters, it will introduce your employees to your culture, your mission, and your values. In the introduction section, you can actually share your company's history. You can talk about how you've gotten where you are now. You can talk about what your mission, vision, and values are, or what your strategic plan is to move you to that next level. You can define what it is that sets you apart from other companies within your same industry. It's just an opportunity for you to share some information at the very beginning. And when you're bringing new hires on board, it's a great way for you to summarize who you are as an organization and how you value employees. Another thing it does is it communicates to employees what's expected of them. All employees who start want to know, how the heck do I request time off? Or if I'm going to be sick, who do I call? What am I supposed to do? If there are safety regulations, you'll want to make sure you include those. And of course, that section might be far more detailed or elaborate if you work for a manufacturing facility than if you work for a professional services firm. So you want to make it relevant to your specific organization. You also can define your organization's dress code. So there's lots of different things that employees will need to know that you'll want to make sure that you address so that they know what they have to do in order to meet your expectations. An employee handbook can also inform employees about what they can expect from management and leadership, your compliance with regards to state and federal laws, and what they can expect from you with regards to diversity and harassment and things of that nature. You can communicate things about hours of work, when your office is open or when the shifts are, so that they're aware of those types of things. Just because one person may have an 8-to-5 job doesn't mean that everybody does. So it's kind of nice to outline, we are a facility whose business hours are 8 to 5. Some employees will work a shift from 7 to 4. Others will work a shift from 9 to 6. Whatever your circumstance is, letting employees know the hours of work can be really, really helpful for them in order to meet your expectations. You'll also want to communicate things like your pay dates. So do you pay monthly? Do you pay bi-weekly? Do you pay twice a month? Whatever it is that you are doing with regards to that employee, you'll want to make sure that you communicate that. An employee handbook also helps to ensure that key policies are consistently communicated. If you have all of your policies in one handbook and that handbook goes to every employee, then every employee should know what it is that is expected of them. And at least you have a document that your managers can refer to when they're experiencing employee issues. They can always go back to the handbook and say, hey, per our handbook, you're supposed to log in and log out every day. When you go on break, you're supposed to log out of the system and log back in. You can set those expectations, and if you consistently enforce them, it will allow you the opportunity to really manage your workforce better. What's great about that too is that if you are consistently enforcing them, it will limit the amount of claims that actually will be processed through. Employee handbooks can also allow you to showcase your benefits. If you offer benefits to your employees, this is the perfect place to show them, hey, here's all the benefits. We offer health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, pet insurance. You know, it allows you the opportunity to really let them know what it is that you offer. But in your handbook, you're going to want to make sure you keep it pretty basic. So in the handbook, you list the benefits, you list what the eligibility requirements are, and maybe even what the effective date of the benefits might be, as well as just general details such as who the provider is. You don't want to go into too much detail with your benefits because benefits change on an annual basis. Premium amounts change, deductibles change, the type of plan changes. The usual things that are consistent are going to be who the provider is, whether that would be Blue Cross Blue Shield or Health Partners. That usually will stay the same unless you make a large change, as well as what those eligibility requirements are. You know, full-time employees are eligible for health benefits, or if you offer them to part-time employees, part-time and full-time employees are eligible for health benefits. You want to keep it basic because the more detail you provide whenever that benefit changes, you will have to go into your employee handbook and make revisions. So you try and keep it basic. Employee handbooks also allow you to showcase your policies with regards to time away from the office. So if you have paid time off plans, you'll want to list those out. If you have unpaid leave that you offer employees, you can list those out as well. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about those later on today. Employee handbooks ensure compliance, and this is really one of the primary reasons employers choose to have a handbook, is because it demonstrates that you are compliant with state and federal regulations, and it establishes what the employee's rights are with regards to those different federal and state regulations. There are different size employers that have to comply with various laws, but for the most part, EEO is one, discrimination or harassment is another. Those are policies that while you may need to have a certain number of employees in order to have to include them, it just makes good business sense to let an employee know, hey, we don't discriminate against individuals based on protected classes. Or if you are harassed in the workplace, here's the process that you can follow, because we want to create a work environment that's free from harassment. So making sure that you have those types of policies in there allows you to demonstrate that you are committed to being compliant with those federal and state regulations. The other thing an employee handbook should do is it should allow employees the opportunity to figure out where it is that they're supposed to go if something is going wrong in their work environment. So if there are workplace violations such as safety concerns or harassment or discrimination, your employee handbook should outline the individuals that they can go to talk about what they've seen or experienced. And it's always a good idea to list a couple of different options for them. The first one is usually their supervisor, right? If you see this happening, report it to your supervisor. But if their supervisor is the one who is discriminating or harassing against them, they need to be able to have another contact to go to. So typically it's the supervisor, human resources, or maybe even the CEO. Allow them the opportunity to have a couple of different individuals to go to if there are workplace issues. And that allows you to keep things in-house so you can resolve situations rather than having an employee not know who to go to or not feel comfortable with one person to go to and then seek to get some resolution by going to an attorney. So that can really help out if you do provide them with the individuals that they can approach with issues. Having an employee handbook can help you defend against employee claims. When you have an employee handbook in place that clearly defines processes or policies or your compliance with regards to state and federal laws, it is demonstrating that you are taking reasonable care to create a proper work environment. And if you have an employee handbook and somebody does file a claim against you, the first thing that an attorney is going to do is they're going to say, show me your handbook and show me that they have signed an acknowledgement form indicating that they were aware of the policy. If you have those things, it makes it far more difficult for an employee to successfully get monetary resolution on a claim that they might be filing. The other thing an employee handbook allows you is consistency. If it's in writing and all of your management team knows about it and your employees know about it, then you can consistently enforce your policies and your practices. When you don't have something in writing, you leave it up for interpretation, and what one manager interprets a policy to be or an unwritten policy to be might be different from a way that someone else interprets it. So by having a written policy in a handbook, it allows you the opportunity for more consistency with enforcing things. So what should you include in your employee handbook? There are a variety of different things that you can include based upon your organization, and what's great is that there is no cookie cutter template for a handbook because each organization is different, right? Even organizations within the same industry may operate differently, and that's what's great about an employee handbook is you can customize it to your specific organization. All right, so in your introduction, as we mentioned earlier, is going to be your company history, your mission, your vision, and your values. It can be anywhere from 1 page to 3 pages, although with the attention span of folks today, you probably need to keep it relatively short, so try and keep it to 1 page. But just really explain who your company is and what makes you different and why an employee would be excited to be part of your organization and why you're excited to have them as an employee. The next section would be compliance, and with compliance comes all of just the general types of things such as an at-will employment clause. At-will employment is a classification that is in every state except for Montana, and basically at-will employment means that an employee can terminate their employment at any time for any reason with or without notice, and an employer can do the same. And a lot of times, just the way that you phrase it can really make an employee feel good about it. If you phrase it, at-will employment means that we can terminate you at any time for any legal reason, and you can do the same, it makes it sound as though the employer has all the power. And while that may be the case, sometimes phrasing it the other way with the employee first, hey, you can terminate your employment at any time for any reason with or without notice, kind of puts them in a little better position to receive the at-will clause. With at-will employment, you will want to have that in one of the first pages of your employee handbook, but you can also later on in your handbook indicate resignations. You know, if you want to resign from the organization, here's what we expect. As a reminder, we are an at-will employer. However, we would appreciate a 2-week notice, right? So you can actually put that in there. You cannot require someone typically to provide a notice in an at-will state, but you do want to at least have the at-will clause in there. Another compliance piece would be your equal employment opportunity statement, indicating that you are an equal opportunity employer and that you refrain from discriminating against individuals from any protected class. You can even go a step further and say, you know, we value inclusion and we value diversity, to just let your employees know that those are things that you value and you are not going to operate your organization in a discriminatory manner. You'll want to have a conflict of interest policy in your compliance section, which would outline that any actions or activities done outside of work cannot have a conflict of interest for the work that they do within your organization. And then last but not least in that section would be the confidentiality policy. You may have practices, processes, products, tools that are specific to your organization. And every organization, this is the case. You may not make an actual product, but if you do, the way that you make that product, you will want employees to keep that confidential. You won't want your competitors to know how you make that product because you feel you do it the best way possible. For organizations that are more professional services oriented, Perhaps the processes or your approach to things is what you want to keep confidential. Client lists or customer lists, contact information, those kinds of things should be kept confidential. So you want to make sure you outline what it is that you want to keep confidential if an employee either leaves the organization or even while they're working within the organization, the stuff that you don't want them talking with people outside of the organization about. In the conduct section, you can include things like the dress code, and included in the dress code could be any topics related to hair or piercings, if there are safety violations that relate to that. So, you may have some sort of dress code indicating that they can't have a nose ring for some ring, and it might be for a safety reason, or that if they have long hair, they have to wear a hairnet so that their hair doesn't get into food if they're in the food service industry. So you can set your dress code. I would be really, really careful with regards to dress codes because people are getting pretty picky on these. And a lot of folks have dress codes in place where they say, during the summer, women can wear summer sandals, but men must wear closed-toed shoes. And we're starting to see some claims from individuals that say that's gender discrimination. So that is one of the unique ones that's coming up now. Same thing with hair. You have to allow individuals to wear their hair naturally, which means that you cannot tell someone they have to have their hair brushed and pulled back if their natural hairstyle might be an afro, or as long as dreadlocks are maintained and are clean, that may not be something that you can put in the dress code. So we're starting to see some interesting stuff in a variety of states on dress code. But definitely outline it if you do have a specific reason for employees to dress a certain way. Within the conduct section, you will have your anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies. So you will kind of outline what you are preventing. You don't discriminate against individuals in protected classes when it comes to any type of employment action, whether that employment action is hiring, promotions, pay, benefits, educational opportunities, terminations, things of that nature. And then for the harassment policy, clearly defining the different types of harassment that are out there right now. There's sexual harassment, there's hostile work environment harassment, and bullying has become a big one lately. So identifying what some of those behaviors are, but certainly saying that this is a list of behaviors we prohibit and it is not all inclusive. And then allowing employees the opportunity to read that policy and find out who they go to in the event that they either feel discriminated against or harassed. You'll want to make sure in your conduct section you have a substance-free policy that would include drugs, alcohol, marijuana, medical marijuana, or over-the-counter medications, and what your policies are related to that. Certainly you don't want individuals who are under the influence, but in some circumstances, if it is an over-the-counter medication or if medical marijuana is legal in your state, you do have to have a policy in there related to reasonable accommodation for individuals. And then you'll also want to outline a disciplinary action process. So if somebody isn't performing, what are the different ways that you're going to try and get them back on track? And usually it starts with a verbal warning. It may go to a written notification. From there, if you don't see performance improvement, they'll be placed on a performance improvement plan, and then it could lead to termination. Really important that while you have a progressive disciplinary action process, that you indicate in your policy that, we will try to move you through these, but there are some conducts that may require immediate termination. Or any of your policies that you want to put any type of disciplinary action, you can say violation of this policy will lead to disciplinary action up to and including termination. All right, another section to include would be workplace guidelines. And this is where you're going to share information with the employee about your expectations as it relates to the workplace. So one of the sections would be on work hours. Again, this could be a section about our office is open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. However, we operate a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week manufacturing facility. here are the various shifts. We have A shift, B shift, C shift. We have the office shift. So you'll list those different things out, and then you would indicate your, at the time of hire or promotion, the supervisor will review with you what shift you will be placed on, right? So you want to indicate that. If you allow employees to work from home, you'll want to make sure that you have a work from home policy. And it's our recommendation that you review an individual's work from home status at least on an annual basis, just to make sure that it's going fine. I know here at Eide Bailey, we have a lot of folks who do work from home, maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week. And each of those individuals has a work from home agreement that is reviewed on an annual basis. And that provides you with the opportunity to just review it, see if it's working out well. If it is, you continue on, you sign the agreement for the next year. But if it's not, then you at least have an opportunity to talk with them about why it may not be working, why they may need to come back into the office to do their job. In this section, you can also indicate lunch and break periods. These can vary based upon the state and the different classification of the employee. So non-exempt employees, oftentimes an employer is required to provide lunch and break periods, and in some states, they're not required. So you just want to make sure that you're following whatever your state regulations are. The workplace safety section would go in here as well. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are a manufacturing facility, you probably have far more safety related guidelines in place than a general office would for a professional services industry. So just make sure that your workplace safety policy indicates what those safety requirements are, as well as what to do to report workplace safety violations or what to do if someone is injured at work. The Americans with Disabilities Act applies to individuals who have 15 or more employees. So if you have 15 or more, or if you're getting close to it, you'll want to make sure that you include an ADA policy stating that, hey, if you require reasonable accommodation in order to do your job, here's what you need to do. You need to let this person know what that reasonable accommodation is. And of course, that you don't discriminate against individuals with disabilities. The use of company equipment relates to things such as your photocopiers, fax machines, telephones, computers. You want to make sure that you have a policy to outline your expectations with how employees are utilizing office equipment, and to make them aware that, if you do not want them using the equipment for any personal reasons, you need to indicate that. But be really, really realistic with regards to that, because things such as personal email, that kind of thing, you'll want to at least indicate in there what your approach is for the use of company equipment for those personal matters. The next one is the electronic communication. Email or social media, things of that nature. If they are using a company computer for any of that, they need to know that there is no right to privacy with regards to it, because they are using work computer equipment. And even if they're doing it on their break period, if they're using their work computer for it, you can have a policy in place that limits that. My recommendation is that a lot of organizations, when social media first came out, banned social media and told employees, you can't be on social media during work. But the fact of the matter is, almost everyone has a smartphone, and whether they use your work computer to access social media or not, they would be able to get it through their cell phone. So instead of banning the use of social media, teach your employees the proper way to utilize social media to help you as an employer, either to promote things that you've got going on in the workplace, to talk about different cool things that they're doing at work. Today I got to go to a training on such and such, or we're doing a community service activity as an office. Get them to utilize social media in a positive way, and then explain to them that, hey, what you put out in social media is a direct reflection on our organization if people know that you work for us. So be careful about the content that you put out there. And if you harass someone or make disparaging comments about someone or bully someone through social media, it does fall underneath this policy. You can be a little bit more clear with regards to your social media policy by outlining things like that. The communication section is usually what employees want to go to find out about themselves. So when am I getting paid? What are the appropriate deductions that can be taken out of my paycheck per FLSA regulations? What are the different job classifications? And by that I mean, do you have, I always put in handbooks the designation between what exempt and non-exempt means. So exempt level employees are paid on a salary and do not qualify for overtime per FLSA and IRS guidelines. Typically, these positions are manager level roles or those requiring a degree in specialized knowledge. Non-exempt employees are paid on an hourly basis and are eligible for overtime. So, you try and outline those types of things, as well as full-time employees. If you work 36 hours or more per week, you are considered a full-time employee. We also have a 3/4 time employee schedule for those who work 30 hours a week. Those on a half-time schedule work 50 hours a week. We also have seasonal employees or temporary employees, and you can outline those. And then you can even indicate those working 30 hours or more are eligible for the company's benefit and paid time off plans. So you just kind of want to put what the different employee classifications are, and then let employees know, hey, you are a non-exempt full-time employee, or you are a non-exempt seasonal employee. That way they understand what that means because you have it in your policy guide. Salary and bonuses. If you are an organization that reviews compensation on an annual basis, or if you review it more than on an annual basis, go ahead and put that in a policy. Let employees know we set salaries based on position on an annual basis. Each individual's performance is reviewed, and we make salary adjustments as needed based on market performance and on company performance. So you never want to guarantee that someone's going to get a bonus, and it's okay to say that, hey, we'll give salary increases or bonuses based on these factors. And if you establish that salary increases or bonuses are based on how the company performs, as well as how the individual performs and what the marketplace is requiring for individuals in that position, it at least lets the employee know what to expect. Performance reviews. If you have a performance management process or system in place, let your employees know how often they will be receiving a performance review. Promotions and transfers. If you allow employees to transfer from one position to another, or if you have a formal promotion process, you can outline it there. And then travel expenses. If they travel and incur expenses, you'll want to outline the policy for how to be reimbursed for travel expenses. Time away is a great section for employees to learn what it is that they are earning with regards to time away from the office. It seems like before they even start, they want to know how much vacation time they get, or what are the holidays, or when can I be gone from work. So clearly outlining those is an important part of the employee handbook. And I've just listed some of the various time away from work policies that you could put into place. So if you do offer PTO or vacation, you'll want to have a policy on it indicating what the accrual is. So if an employee earns 2 days per month, you'll want to indicate that. Full-time employees or employees working X number of hours a week will earn PTO and vacation time at the following rate. Those working a 50% schedule will accrue PTO or vacation at 50% of the full-time rate. So put in there what the accrual is. So who's eligible and what the accrual is. And then also just a positive statement about, we value our employees and we know that they need time away from work in order to rejuvenate and get rested so that they can hit the ground running again. So for that reason, we have the following PTO plan in place, and then just outline what your plan is. If you are an organization who has vacation and sick leave separated, you'll want to indicate what your sick leave is. And there are several states that now have mandated paid sick leave as part of state law. The states that have mandated sick leave include California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Oregon, Vermont, Arizona, Washington, Rhode Island, Maryland, New Jersey, and then we have Washington, D.C. There are cities within states that have even different paid sick leave regulations, and those cities include San Francisco, Seattle, New York City, San Diego, Oakland, Tacoma, and Philadelphia. And then there are counties that also have different paid sick leave. So it's crazy what is happening with the world of sick leave. The one thing to keep in mind is that if you have a PTO program, which encompasses both the vacation and sick leave, as long as your PTO benefit is, I guess, lucrative enough, it's generous enough to include enough time for vacation and the state or county mandated sick leave, you can still maintain that PTO policy. So for example, if you're an organization that gives 5 weeks of PTO for vacation and sick leave, you are likely in compliance with any state or county or city mandated paid sick leave in addition to vacation. So you just want to make sure that you're taking a look at what the state sick leave or county or city sick leave requirements are, and ensure that if you have a combined PTO plan instead of separating them out, that it is generous enough to cover the paid sick leave requirement. If you offer paid holidays, you'll want to outline which holidays factor into the paid holiday schedule, as well as how many hours an employee will be paid for the holiday. And if you have circumstances where employees work the holiday, you'll want to stipulate what happens to them. Do they get double time for working the holiday? Do they get paid for the holiday per their normal schedule, plus they get, holiday hours added to an account to be used later? You'll want to definitely spell that out. Other types of leave include parental leave, and right now there are several states that have mandated paid parental leave. Those include Washington, New York, California, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. So if you're in any of those locations, you'll want to make sure that your policy manual includes a section on paid parental leave. FMLA is required if you have 50 employees or more, and I noticed there were quite a few of you on the call who fall into that category. FMLA has been expanded with regards to military in several states. So there are some enhanced military benefits that now fall under FMLA, as well as victims of domestic violence. So you'll want to make sure that if you're in a state where the enhanced military benefit under FMLA or the victim of domestic violence segment falls under FMLA, that you're updating your policy appropriately. FMLA is basically the Family Medical Leave Act, and it tells employers that they have to provide time off to employees for family or medical leave. And in most cases, that leave is unpaid, so you don't have to pay it. You may choose to have another policy like short-term disability or your parental leave or your sick leave where you can pay employees for the same types of things that are covered under FMLA. But if you don't have paid leave policies in place, as an employer with 50 or more employees, you are required to at least give them the time away, and they must be able to return to your employment in a position of similar status and pay. So FMLA, there's a lot going on with that right now, and it's definitely one to constantly revisit to make sure that you're in compliance. Other time away, and these two are actually more benefit related, short-term and long-term disability. If you offer those, you just want to indicate what the basic terms of it are and who the provider is. There are a lot of states that require payment for jury duty or witness duty. A lot of states don't require an employer to pay for the time away, but do require that you give them the time off to participate in jury duty or witness duty. Same goes with voting. There are state mandates with regards to employers providing employees with time off to vote. Usually You can indicate in your policy that you want them to vote either before their shift or after their shift. But if the polls are not open during a time when they are not on shift, you have to allow them time during their work shift to leave to go vote. Military leave, that also has been enhanced to include a lot of different things that it didn't previously. I remember many years ago, 29 years ago, when I entered human resources, military leave was just the 2 weeks per year and a couple of weekends per month for people to go do their military duty. And now it encompasses individuals being deployed, or if you are a parent or a spouse of someone being deployed, if they're being deployed, you can take time off to spend with them before they are deployed, or when they come back, if they require care because they were injured while in the military, you can have time off to spend with them. Employees who are in the military are, the employer is required to allow them time off to go participate in the military and to participate in events like performing at funerals if they happen to be on the funeral duty for their military service. So there's a lot of new things that fall underneath military leave that employers need to be aware of. And then if you offer personal leaves of absence, so any type of leave of absence that isn't covered underneath vacation, holidays, parental leave, FMLA, medical leave, that kind of thing, if you're willing to offer a personal leave of absence, you can certainly put that in. Usually those are unpaid. And so then I did also list unpaid leave of absence. And an example of something like that would be if your bereavement leave allows for 2 or 3 days of paid time off for someone to attend the funeral of an immediate family member. That's very nice. It's a very nice policy to have. But let's say someone's spouse or child, unfortunately, passes away. I don't know about you, but I might need more than 3 days if my spouse or my child or even my parent passes away. And so I might utilize the bereavement time off that's paid by the company. I might utilize some PTO for that, but in the event that I need to take more time off, I would then be placed on an unpaid personal leave of absence because my employer offers that. And you're not required to offer it. It's just something to consider as you're looking at time away from work type of benefits. Under the benefits section of an employee handbook, what I would highly recommend you do is that you list the different types of benefits that you provide to your employees and also indicate who is eligible for those benefits. So if it's full-time employees only, you're going to indicate that. If it's part-time employees who at least work 25 hours a week, you'll put that. And then you'll just list out what the different benefits are. And for the general information, you would include the provider. So for example, with dental benefits, Delta Dental is a dental provider that's quite popular. If that's who your dental benefit provider is, underneath the dental benefit section, you would put dental benefits are provided through Delta Dental. Full-time employees are eligible for this benefit. And then if you cover a portion of the premium, you can even indicate that. We pay for a portion of the premium and the employee is required to pay for the remainder of the premium. You don't want to get into too much detail on these because as I mentioned earlier, things change on an annual basis when you're going through annual enrollment and you decide maybe you can't afford to pay as much towards the benefits. You don't want to be locked into it or have to go update your handbook every single time you're updating your benefit plans. Other benefits include flexible spending accounts or health savings accounts for those high deductible plans that you might have in place. Retirement, if you do any type of contribution to the retirement plan for an employee, you'll want to put that in there. Life insurance, tuition reimbursement, continuing professional education. If you offer any voluntary benefits such as long-term care, accident care, hospital care, cancer or critical illness insurance or pet insurance. I've also seen legal insurance, so legal aid. I don't know, college tuition reimbursement for new college grads who join your organization. You may provide some sort of tuition payment for them, student loan payments. right? So whatever the benefits are that you offer, you're going to want to list those out and just make sure that you include who is eligible for them and when those benefits are effective. So for example, for medical insurance, if an employee is eligible for them upon hire and they go into effect the first of the month following their start date, you're going to want to include that in your benefit section. All right, so here's a few additional tips with regards to employee handbooks. First thing, keep it easy to read. There are certainly going to be sections that relate to federal employment laws like EEO, or if you have an affirmative action policy, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or preventing harassment, where it's kind of legal speak because you want to make sure that you got the legal stuff in there. But you're also going to want to make sure that you put things in layman's terms. Make it as easy for the lowest level of employee that you have to be able to read and to understand. You're going to want to make sure you have an Atwill statement for all those states other than Montana, just so that, and reinforcing it at the beginning, reinforcing it in your acknowledgement, reinforcing it in any type of documentation related to exiting the organization. Just make sure that you have that at-will clause in there. You're also going to want to make sure that you state that your employee handbook is not a contract and does not promise continued employment. And you're going to want to make sure that employees understand that your handbook trumps all other and previous documents on policy, and that you'll want to state that this is the only person who can make changes to policy. It's typically the CEO. The CEO is the only person who can make changes to policy, and that all policies are subject to change and that they will be communicated with employees. It's important to do that, to make sure that if you do change policies, that you communicate those changes to your employees. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. The things to be aware of, first thing to be aware of is deviating from your policies. If you have a policy in place and you implement that policy one way with one person and differently with another person, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to find yourself in a court defending yourself, because one of those employees is going to feel they were treated unfairly. So make sure that you stick to your policies and that you don't adopt illegal policies or practices. One of the areas where that can happen is in drug testing. So if you have a drug testing policy, make sure it complies with your state laws. Also, make sure that your restrictive policies like progressive discipline aren't super restrictive. Make sure that it doesn't say you will go through these 4 steps before termination, because certainly there are circumstances where you need to terminate immediately, and you don't want to lock yourself into that based on your policy. Otherwise, you will find yourself in court as well. You also don't want vague policies. If you can't be specific enough on a policy, then maybe don't include it. You do not want there to be any room for misinterpretation. So if you firmly believe you need to have a policy in place, be specific about how it is to be carried out or implemented. I've talked a little bit about a signed acknowledgement form. You absolutely need to have an acknowledgement form for your handbook that every single employee signs. All right. What an acknowledgement form will do is it is the documented proof that the handbook was given to this employee. We reviewed the handbook with them. They're aware of what is expected of them. They know who to go to if they have issues in the workplace. And it basically says that they are agreeing to the terms and conditions. So they'll sign and date it. I recommend that you do this during orientation, and that you then take that employee's signed acknowledgement form and place it in their personnel file. Now, you may have employees who refuse to sign it. It happens. There might be policies in there that they don't agree with. It doesn't mean you're not going to enforce them. It also doesn't mean that they can just get away with not complying with policies. So if you have an employee who's refusing to sign it, ask them to write, "I refuse to sign this," and have them sign and date that statement. And if they won't do that, then you have a company representative. Typically, if you have a human resources person, they can do this, or have like the CEO or somebody in a higher level position write, "The employee refused to sign." And then you initial sign and date it. If the If you have a signed acknowledgement form, this is really, really going to help you in those situations where an employee does file a claim, because the first thing the attorney is going to do is say, show me your handbook and show me their signed acknowledgement form. It is really important to update your employee policy manual, and handbooks actually should be looked at least once a year. My recommendation is to actually look at your fiscal year, and about 6 months prior to fiscal year end, take a review of your employee handbook, note the things that need to be changed, either based on work conditions, the environment, what you're doing, or federal and state employment laws, and make the changes so that they are then effective at the beginning of your new fiscal year. You'll want to stay in touch with things like minimum wage changes and overtime rules. Those of you in the state of Minnesota, there is a new law. It's the Minnesota wage theft law. And there are some pretty significant requirements with regards to how you communicate an employee's pay, what's coming out of the pay, what the pay includes, when they're going to receive their pay. You have to have addresses and phone numbers on all pay stubs. You have to provide them with a document at the time that you hire someone. And then if you have pay increases or their pay changes at any point, you have to redo the entire form all over again. So the Minnesota wage theft law is something to keep in mind. And because it's happening in Minnesota, I'm pretty sure we will start seeing it in some other states as well. Paid leaves and paid sick leave laws are also things that are changing significantly. So you'll want to make sure that you're staying in tune with those. And there might be circumstances where in the middle of the year, based on a state or federal regulation, you have to make a change to your policy. And I just highly recommend you do it right when you need to. And when you make changes, communicate those changes and request that employees sign an acknowledgement. So for that reason, you might want to consider electronic or digital handbooks that you update. You can send an email to your employees saying, hey, the handbook has been updated. We need for you to review it and get us our acknowledgement and provide a date on which they need to submit that acknowledgement form. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of an employee claim, if you do and you have an employee handbook, you can see that it can help you out in those circumstances. So to wrap up, the average cost to defend against an employee lawsuit runs into the 6 figures. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anyone. It includes lawyer fees and settlement costs. The thing that I found really, really surprising is that 25% of the cases that go to trial result in a judgment for $500,000 or more. And that's significant money, right? That's money that an employer does not want to be spending on a disgruntled employee. So in order to prevent that from happening, we want to make sure that you have a solid employee handbook in place, that you review it on a regular basis and communicate those changes with your employees. And so with that, I thank you for your time. And I guess we'll open it up for questions for those who are able to stay on. And I'll also send out an email to respond to any questions that came in that we may not get to.
All right, so first question is, for the Atwill states, what is the key to include?
Sure. So an at-will clause really should just say your organization name. ABC organization is an at-will employer, which indicates you are able to terminate your employment at any time for any reason with or without cause. An ABC organization may terminate your employment at any time for any reason, for any legal reason, sorry, with or without cause. All right. What that means is you don't ever have to tell an employee why you termed them. Right? You're having an issue with somebody, you want to get them out of your organization, you legally can terminate them unless you're discriminating against them, right? You're terminating them because they are a female over the age of 40 who is in a wheelchair. All right, you can't terminate somebody for those specific reasons, right? But if you're terminating the individual because they just aren't a good fit, not doing their job, you can terminate them. And you don't have to give them a reason, but let's be honest, if you don't give someone a reason and they are shocked by it, you are going to end up in a court of law with a wrongful termination claim. And you're going to have to prove it. You're going to have to prove why you hired them. So why not go through a progressive discipline situation where you tell them, you know what, our expectation is that you answer 100 customer calls per day and get them, get 25% of them to complete resolution. We've noticed that you're only taking 72 calls and you have a 3% resolution rate. We need to see improvement in this area. And then if that conversation doesn't work, then you move, to the written documentation or the performance improvement plan. And then when they're still not meeting the expectation after the set out time, you meet with them to say, we're terminating you today because as we indicated, we needed for you to answer 100 client calls and have a 25% resolution rate. We are still sitting at 52 calls and a 7% resolution rate. So for that reason, we're terminating you. Make things clear, and it's going to limit the number of claims that are presented to you. But in an email, I'll actually take our Atwill clause and we'll email that out to everyone.
Okay, just two more here, and if anyone else has anything else, we will email those out separately. You can always reach out to Lori directly or email us and we will get it to her. With multi-state employer, where some drugs are legal in one state and not in another, how do you address that in the handbook?
Yep. In your handbook, you can actually indicate for Colorado, where Colorado gets picked on because I think they were one of the first. For Colorado employees, and you can indicate your marijuana policy, right? For this policy, if you have a certificate for or the prescription for medical marijuana, we will just need a note from your doctor indicating what your reasonable accommodation needs to be. They still can't show up high as a kite, right? They need to be able to perform their job. So if there is reasonable accommodation, for example, they have to take medical marijuana, but then they can't drive, and part of their role is driving. If it's a reasonable accommodation, you're going to have to make it. So your policy, you'll just clearly state that it's for employees in this state, here's the policy that applies.
Okay.
And then all other states, here's the policy.
Perfect. Okay, so our last question here is just what is your recommendation for issuing an employee handbook besides printing?
So there are electronic formats, or if your company has an intranet, so just an internal internet, only your employees can see it, you can put it out on the company intranet, or if there is a specific drive or a share file document management site where you share content with employees, you can have an electronic version. And that certainly is an easy way of doing it. The thing is, you want to make sure that you're still getting those acknowledgement forms. And if you have all of your personnel files are online, then you can have the acknowledgement go into their personnel file. You just want to make sure that you have all the components. So the document needs to be out there for people to view, and you need to get some sort of signed document, whether they print it off or you save it electronically into their personnel file. That's a good way of doing it. I know at Eide Bailey, we do review our handbook on an annual basis, and all of our updated policies are effective the first day of our new fiscal year. We receive one email that outlines the updated policies, and then that way it's being communicated on a regular basis, and every couple of years we're asked to sign a new acknowledgement form. And I know that Outlook has different features, voting buttons, so you can tell an employee, please review these, and then once you've reviewed it, click on the acknowledgement, and you can use the voting button as an acknowledgement, but you just want to make sure that you are tracking those acknowledgements. That's one of the most important pieces.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lori, and thank you to everyone who attended. And if you guys do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.